Hello, and welcome back to the Seeing Better podcast. I'm your host, Shelby Nix, and I am sitting down to record today. Today is Saturday, and it's absolutely gorgeous outside. I did a lot of walking. I took a nice long nap, which just felt amazing, and also played tennis this morning. So, all around, great day. I also cleaned my apartment, which always feels great. I am a very organized and clean person. And it's funny, having lived with roommates before in college, I had some challenges understanding why some other people weren't as clean, or even with my own family. But I've come to terms with the fact that for the most part, in every living situation or even travel situation, I'm probably going to be one of the most clean and tidy people. And I just have to own it. So that's part of who I am. It's something that I love to do and honestly get a lot of joy out of. So, inspired by this, I have decided to record an episode on my packing tips. Now, I'm sure I'm missing a good handful of things, but I thought that I would record it now since I just went on my trip to London and Iceland. So, this past trip, I did not check a bag for obvious reasons. When I go to London, I take the tube to and from my friend's flat. Very British of me. They're flat. And so it's very hard to bring a carry on, let alone a giant checked bag. So I always make sure that I have at least a roller carry on and either a bag or a backpack type situation. So this past trip, I did just that. And I have a shoulder bag that I bought about 2 years ago at Target. And to be quite honest, it is not the best. It was more of a last minute situation. And now I know what I really want to purchase. And that is the base weekender bag, but the mini one. I actually ordered the regular size one a couple years ago around that same time because I was going on a separate trip to Europe and wanted to level up my packing game, so to speak. I'm always in the market for whatever's the best, and the most ergonomic and fits all the things I want to fit and all of that kind of stuff. And it ultimately was too big for my carry on that I have and too wide on the top. So I am going to instead purchase the mini version because that'll fit very nicely over my carry on. And the carry on that I have is the international size away carry on suitcase, which has suited me very well over the past couple of years. I've probably had it for at least a good 3 or 4 years at this point and have done quite a lot of traveling with that suitcase. I recommend it. I don't think it's necessarily something you have to splurge on. I think there's some other great options. Like I mentioned, Base has some good options. Samsonite has some good options, and even Calpac too. They have a ton of different styles and sizes and that kind of thing. What I will say about a carry-on suitcase though is that I would recommend, if you end up traveling internationally at least once a year or even more than that, that you do a little bit of research and decide upon a size where you can travel internationally with it. That was the reason why I had purchased the international size. If you end up traveling domestically within the United States, I'm sure that the regular away carry-on suitcase or even just a regular size carry-on suitcase that you purchase here in the States would be just fine. But in other countries, they have different size allotment. So I would just make sure that you check that out if that's something of concern. I like that I don't have to decide upon what I'm going to bring. I just know I'm going to bring that carry on pretty much always, unless it's some kind of excursion or backpacking situation. But for the most part, I always end up taking that with me. And with the mini base weekender bag, I think I'll be perfectly fine. I do have some trips coming up, and I think I'll end up just using that same shoulder bag or another purse for the meantime, but would love to purchase something like that when I can. So let's get into the packing tips. I have a few of them and I thought I'd go through them as I love this topic. This is just something that really gets me going. So I will say a lot of these tips are pretty well known, but if you're someone who really wants to level up your packing game and make it the best it can possibly be, these are the ones that always come to mind. So number one is to bring a carry-on if at all possible. So as I had mentioned, for this past trip, I ended up doing that. And if it's possible for you to do that, I do recommend it because it's just easier to get around. You feel more mobile. And if you're going to a city, especially, and taking public transportation, that's really what it's all about. I find that in a group setting as well, it's better to just have what you can actually carry and feasibly carry. Otherwise, checking bags ends up being very laborious and takes more time. And obviously, you have to pay for the bags as well for the most part. Now, if you are going on a trip that's longer than 4 weeks, or even longer than 7 days, I would recommend that you pack for the 7 days and then just end up washing. So last week when I was traveling, I was able to wash my clothes in the Airbnb that we had in Iceland. And then my friends also had a washer in their flat as well, which made it very easy for me to be able to do a load of laundry, which for me makes me very, very happy. Like I said, I'm a very clean person, so I like to wash my clothes pretty much as possible. In my current apartment, I have a communal washer dryer, which is fine for the most part, but I can't wait for the day when I have an in-unit washer dryer and I can just wash things whenever I want to. So you have your carry-on, you have your shoulder bag, whatever it is that works best for you. I know a lot of people also like backpacks. For me, I'm not as big of a backpack person, but if I found the right one, then maybe I would. I do like bags that go over the handle of the carry-on with that slot thing in the back that many bags have nowadays. I just find it to be the most functional. And I know the options from Away and Base both have that, so definitely check that out. But a backpack is also great too if you like that. I would recommend that you keep a bag with all your TSA size toiletries in it at all times. So I have a bag that's in my bathroom that actually is also from Base. So it's a double-sided clear toiletry bag that I keep on hand whenever I need to grab things and need to pack. So it's not as if I'm rifling through all of my items and deciding what I need to bring. I have that as at least a base of what I would like to bring for that trip. So it has a little travel kit with some like extra emergency supplies in there, a bar of soap, things like that that I know I might need, or even one of those TSA toothpaste and toothbrush packs, things like that, just that make it easier for me and less daunting to pack every time that I do it. And if you travel for work at all, I'm sure that can sometimes get stressful too. And what I will say is that in terms of packing, the more you do it, the better you get. I used to overpack significantly, and now I know for the most part that I end up using about 90% of what I pack on any given trip, which for me is a really good ratio. I would love to get to 100%, but there's always that margin of error that you have just in case something might come up. So for this last trip, I brought some things and they didn't end up being totally useful, but for the most part, it was about 90% that I ended up using, which was great because I needed as much of the space as I possibly could use. Now, this is another pretty obvious tip, but sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle for some people, and that is that you should be wearing the heaviest and bulkiest items on the plane. So for the past trip that I had to London, I was wearing a sweatsuit for comfort on the plane, which is just a must. I had to be comfy because it was an 11-hour flight, and that was first and foremost what was going to happen. And then I wore my parka on top and just took it off right when I got on the plane in the overhead bin compartment. So then I was comfortable and had lots of movement in my seat, or at least as much movement as I can in a little box of a seat. That is key, because also traveling internationally, you might find that certain airlines actually weigh your baggage if you bring it on to the plane. I've only had this happen maybe once, and it was very stressful. I will give a little bit of a side story because it's kind of interesting. So a lot of my friends and family know the story, but it was wild. So I was living in Paris and I was intending to fly back to move back to the States. And obviously, that's a pretty big move. I had a friend that flew out and did the same flight back to LA the week prior, and she said, leave even earlier than you think, because sometimes Charles de Gaulle gets crazy and it's about an hour drive there, yada, yada, yada. Things happen. And if you know anything about the French culture, the French love to go on strike, and that will come in handy in just a few minutes. So I was like, okay, good, good. I will make sure of that. So I want to say maybe the flight was at like 1 p.m., let's say, and I was trying to leave by about 8, so super early, but I knew that I had bags with me that I needed to check because I was moving back, and there was also a checkout process that I had with my apartment, things like that. And also I was by myself, which just makes things even more complicated. And as I'm bringing trash out, that was my final step in clearing out my apartment, was just bringing the trash bags out to the trash. I ended up somehow getting stuck inside of my apartment. Now, most people end up getting stuck outside of their apartments because maybe they lost the key or it's not working, but I was stuck inside. So I had all of my bags ready to go. I was intending to bring out the last bag of trash from the apartment, and I was 99% ready to go. And I ended up getting stuck inside of the apartment, and I was astounded. So, this apartment building was extremely sterile and kind of felt like a bit of a prison. It was like very locked in. And this door was actually a a giant steel door, and it had a automatic key fob. And I don't know what happened still to this day, to be quite honest. I don't know if there was some kind of malfunction with the key, whatever. It ended up being completely stuck. And it was also like, since it was made of steel, you couldn't just knock the door down. Like, it was a whole production. So I'm obviously stressed at this point. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is happening here? This is crazy. And so I call my neighbor that I was friends with, and I told her, I said, can you go outside and see if maybe, like, you can see anything? And she was like, no, no. So I called the landlord, and at this time, the landlord was changing. And so it was this other woman. And mind you, since I'm in France, I call this number that you're supposed to call in case of an emergency at this apartment, and I had to speak in French, which at the time my French was okay, but it was definitely not at the level that it should have been in this kind of emergency situation. And so I was explaining to this woman, I said, I'm stuck inside, and she just couldn't understand that I was stuck inside. She was like, oh, I'll get you your key and it'll be fine. I was like, no, I'm actually stuck inside of my apartment. So something's going to have to happen. I don't know if the fire department is going to have to be called or what, but this is kind of extreme. And so she ends up coming to the outside of the doorway, and she sees my friend there. That's my neighbor. And they're trying to translate. And meanwhile, they're yelling, but I can't hear them because it's a steel door. And so it's nearly impossible. It feels like things are just going really, really south. Now she tries to explain to my friend that I should just try to jump out the window. Mind you, I'm on the second floor, and the backyard of this apartment, like I said, it's very sterile, was actually a cemetery. So had I jumped out of the building, I would have been 6 feet under in the ground. This lady would have no idea. And my bags would be fine, but I would not be. And long story short, they end up getting yet another person, a technician, to come and basically drill down the door. So he had to not just unhinge it, but actually drill like the siding of the door to get the door open. And voila, I was able to leave. So I leave, and at that point, I believe it was about 3 hours before my flight was about to leave, which for most trips that should be just fine. But considering I had bags with me and I was by myself, it was stressful. I was like, okay, so now this is the time that my friend left at, and she said we needed more time. And so now I'm, basically against the clock. I get in an Uber. I have a little bit of a respite, but I'm still stressed. I'm just making sure that I get there on time. And obviously, this is a big trip ahead of me, so things are just a bit tense. I get to the airport, and this is where the strike comes in, because the customs agents have decided to go on strike. And if you've ever been to Charles de Gaulle Airport before, you know that it's basically an entire circle once you get into the security area. And so there are just circles of people around this building. I'm not even kidding. Like, the entire diameter of this building is filled with people in a line. And I was like, oh no, this is not good. And I was like, okay, let's just get in the line and then we'll figure this out, because I don't know what's going on here. This is craziness. So I get in the line, and people are yelling, and they end up having people call out their flight numbers, and they allow people to go ahead that have the closest flight. So thank God for that. But I just did miss a piece of this as well. And that was the whole point, which was before I got to this security entrance, I had to check in my bags. So I checked in my bags that I knew I would have to check in. And then they weighed my carry-on and my hand luggage. And I want to say that one of them or the other was too heavy, and I had to adjust things and move. And you know, when you have your carry-on, you're basically packing it to the gills, and you have everything exactly where you think you need it. And so I had to, do the whole like undoing my suitcase in the check-in location, and that was just a mess and something I never want to do, but ended up happening because I was flying Norwegian Airlines, and they did end up weighing my bags, which was just the last thing that I wanted. So after I do that, I do the whole kerfuffle of moving things around to make sure that the hand luggage and the carry-on bag weigh the right amount, yada yada. I go up, and then I come across the strike. And long story short, I wait in the line, and they're calling people up that have the nearest flight times. And at that point, it was pretty much a mad dash to get into the flight. I made it on time, but I was so exhausted when I got home. It was insane. It was also my birthday that day. So it was just a crazy birthday, and something that I would have never expected in a million years. All that to say that if you are flying internationally, or if you're flying on an airline that you're not familiar with, see if that's a policy that they have, if they are actually going to weigh your luggage. And in Europe and other places, really anywhere besides the US, I've found that the luggage allotment is just much less than what we expect domestically. So make sure that you check in on that, is all that to say. So all that giant story is said and done. I've learned a lot. Let's get back into the tips. Where was I? Yes. Okay. I have another tip, and this was inspired by an episode of the Huberman Lab podcast that I listened to a couple years ago, because when I was in COVID, I was not traveling for, I don't know, whatever, 2 years. And then I was going somewhere, and I can't remember. Maybe I was going to London, something. I was going on a long trip and was anticipating that I might be jet lagged. So he has a really great episode on beating jet lag, where he mentioned the use of a sunlight lamp, and it has a certain amount of lux, like 1,000 lux or something like that, which is the way that you measure the light. And if you use that for maybe an hour or so a day, it can help beat jet lag. It can also beat seasonal affectiveness disorder, or at least help treat it. So I did buy one of those at the time, and the one that I had originally broke, so I bought another one for this past trip. I didn't end up using it all that much, but I will say if I did, I feel like I probably would have been better for it. So you can even just use it at your desk for some sunlight if you feel like you haven't been outside all that much. That's another great way to get light in your eyes, so you can adjust to the time zone and also do plenty of other things as well. Along with this, I would say this is easier said than done. However, I would try to keep your routine as much as you can while you're traveling. And my philosophy has changed on this over time, because when I was younger, I was all just about like, let's like hit the ground running and just go and see everything. And while I still love to maximize my time, I also know that if I'm able to keep some semblance of a routine, then I can ultimately have more energy to do what I want to do. And if you've ever had a bad case of jet lag, it will just take you down. And we all know that when we're traveling, we also have a tendency to pick up sicknesses more often. So this is something to consider within that. So in my last trip that I had a few weeks ago, I did a few things. So I had the Lux lamp that I was able to use in case I needed it. I also had some reading books with my Amber reading light to have before bed to just wind down and continue to have that. I also had my protein packs in a travel size pouch, which, to be honest, is disgusting, just mixed into water instead of a traditional smoothie. But that's just what I had to do. I had to get the protein in. So it is what it is. And I'm going to bring it on my next trip too. And then I also brought everyone's favorite chomps. So we had like 2 giant packs of chomps and we just ate that the whole time. I had chomp sticks, so I would have at least one of those a day, and then also a pack of almonds, which just helped me have a snack on the go in case we were running in between things, because when you're traveling, obviously you never know when your next meal is going to be. I also wanted to avoid eating on the plane if I could, and I did on the way there, but on the way back I had to eat, which is fine. But I wanted to keep the healthy eating habits that I was having. So that helped me get there a little bit easier, like more easily. Packing cubes. If you have not discovered packing cubes, I highly recommend it. I think some people are on the fence because they think, oh, are packing cubes necessary? Do I really need them? And if you've lived without them, you probably don't think you do. But if you've ever used them, you know how useful they can be, especially if you have a carry-on and a hand luggage situation on your hands. The packing cubes just make it so easy to put exactly what you want where you need it. And you can even put them in a backpack stacked up. You can put them very easily in different forms of bags and luggage and such. And what I like to do as well is put a packing cube in there just for dirty laundry so that I can keep it consolidated and not have things rummaging everywhere. I really like things to keep things very clean and concise. Packing cubes all the way. This is another random tip and one that I got from my mom. And when she started to bring these on trips, I was like, oh, that's like kind of lame. I don't know, whatever. But she would bring these quick dry towels that I think are used for triathlons and other training things like that. But they're basically these quick dry towels and they don't weigh much at all and they can fit into like a square like this. And they just are so easy to bring with you when you're on a trip where you might be in the water. So I did bring them to Iceland. I didn't end up using them because we didn't go in the water, but it would have been great for something like that. If you're hiking and you are going to the top and you're going to go in the waterfall or something, great for that too, because it doesn't weigh very much. On top of that, I would say the collapsible bags that you can fold into a little square are also great, just in case you need to have a bag for one reason or another, and it really doesn't take up any space. If you're traveling for a longer time, so this goes back to my original message on traveling for longer than, let's say, a week, depending on what you need, I would recommend that you consider buying some supplies when you get there. Instead of feeling like you need to have everything on your hands, especially things like sunscreen, I would recommend you just buy there if you're going for longer than maybe 7 days or even longer than that. For instance, I went to Barcelona when I was in college and I didn't bring sunscreen, but boy, did I need it. And it was absolutely crucial. So well worth it buying it there. And I needed so much on that trip that I would have ran out of whatever I had anyways in my carry-on. Adding on to this would be buy your favorite products in travel size so you can just grab and go. Again, this might seem like a little bit of an excessive purchase, but I do think if you travel quite often, you just know how easy this can be for you. And it makes it much, much easier just to pack and travel. I do have reusable silicone bottles that are TSA approved for my cleanser and body wash, things like that if I need it. but I prefer to just buy the travel size if and when I can to make things very easy on me. And so I don't need to be transferring things. I know there are also those little hexagonal cubes that magnetize together that some people like too. So something to think about if you are looking for the best of the best option. Another travel safe tip would be, and this is more so if you are checking a bag, but in any case, I think this is still a good tip, and that is to keep a change of clothes and underwear and a toothbrush with you in your carry-on, just in case if anything goes wrong. I had another trip a couple years ago where I had the same setup and we had a transfer and they made me check my bag even at the gate. And sometimes you just get unlucky with that kind of stuff. And luckily, I had my bag with me with an extra change of clothes. And this was in Sardinia in Italy. So all I really needed was my toothbrush and some bathing suits. And I was set. And luckily, it ended up being just fine. But things happen and you want to make sure that you have something just for the time being while you can get your bags back to your location of choice. This is something I haven't done yet, but something I am really considering doing, which is buying a Kindle to save space. My friend Paige had the smallest size of Kindle, I believe, with her on this past trip, and it was so handy. It's the size of, about this big, about the size of a index card, maybe a little bit bigger, very light, and you can basically put it in pretty much any fanny pack or any bag you have. But it helps you save so much space. And I also know the Kindles have a nice light on it, so you don't even need that extra light. So I just feel like a Kindle is really smart, especially when you have very little space. This is another tip that I got from my mom growing up. She is more of an overpacker, but this one is very, very true. And I highly recommend this if you don't already do it. And that is, regardless of the trip, always bring a bathing suit. Always bring a bathing suit because you never know when there's going to be some kind of hot tub or spa situation or whatever. Like, you don't want to be stranded without a bathing suit. So always bring a bathing suit, even keep one in your car. It's just great to be able to jump in whenever the opportunity comes. This is not a packing tip, but just a rule of thumb. And that is, to all you people that live on the edge, I salute you, but get to the airport early if you can. This is going to just alleviate stress. I don't mind when I get to the airport just sitting somewhere and getting a snack or using the restroom or walking around even. I walk so much in airports just because I like to keep moving. But just get to the airport early. You never know what things could happen. Like that crazy trip I had with getting stuck inside my apartment. You just don't know. So play it on the safe side. This is a tip that I learned from TikTok, and I hope I'm explaining it correctly. But basically, what you do is you text your flight number, like as if it's a phone number, to yourself, and it comes up with the flight details so you can keep an eye on if there's any delays and the gate and things like that. I thought that was so, so smart. You'll have to look up the TikTok to actually see how this works, but it's as simple as it sounds. So just give it a try and see if you like it. I also have the American Airlines app and usually any other airlines app if I am using them on my phone for simplicity, to be able to see if anything has changed and to have my boarding pass there already on there. If you're using a printed boarding pass, I don't know what you're doing. Like, make sure you have an external charger to be able to have your boarding pass on your phone because it is just so much easier. I can't say that enough. In terms of packing outfits, this can be challenging. And back in the day, I feel like I used to just overcomplicate things and felt like I needed my whole wardrobe for a couple of days. But what you really need to think about is functionality first and foremost, and also versatility. So you need items that can be used multiple different days and in different ways. So if you're traveling for a longer weekend, maybe you pack one pair of jeans, a light sweater, a couple of tops, underwear for each and every day, and then one more, obviously a bra, and your swimsuit, a dress, and a skirt. And then you have so many different options with you. You can always freshen it up with accessories. So I have a little pouch for my jewelry, so then you can mix and match things up. If you have colors that are more forgiving, you can also, hopefully wear all of those things with whatever it is that you're bringing. And you can add flair with even a scarf or a hat, things like that. But I would keep the base of it pretty simple, and then you can always add things as you wish. That would be my recommendation. And it took me a lot of time to get there, but ultimately that's what is easiest and makes the most sense. If you get overwhelmed with packing and you always feel like you're starting from scratch, what I would do is actually print out a list of items that you think you will need for pretty much any destination ahead of time. And then you can just go ahead and check things off whenever you have a new trip coming up. I actually don't do this right now because for the most part, I can understand what I need to bring for most things, but I have done this before and it's been quite helpful, especially when you're stressed about so many other things. You just need that to be very simple. I mentioned this before, but snacks on the plane, you never know what you're going to be up against in a travel day. So bring some snacks, and that also helps you avoid the need for buying not only expensive, but also very unhealthy snacks at the airport. There's not a lot of healthy options. So I like to bring some incidentals just in case I come into a bind. Be Well by Kelly, or Kelly LeVeque, is a clinical nutritionist, and she has some really great tips on her site, which is bewellbykelly.com, for bridge stacks or even Fab4 on the go, if you're curious of some ideas of healthy eating on the plane. If you're traveling domestically, I don't know about internationally for this so much, but you can bring fresh food if you want. But if it's something like a salad, obviously don't drench your salad in dressing before you go through security, but just put it in a little TSA size approve, and you can have it on the plane, as well as maybe some chopped veggies, whatever it is that you like. I usually just do packaged food just because I need things to last longer, but whatever it is that you prefer, go ahead and do. I like to bring a bag within a bag with my carry-on shoulder item. So what I'll do is I will have a larger shoulder bag with more of like my bulky items, maybe clothes or books, etc. In a future state, my Kindle. And then I bring a purse inside of it to have on my person when I'm traveling and when I'm going through public transportation and security. So I have my passport, my wallet, my phone all in one easy area. So I don't have to be rifling through my bag trying to find things. This leads me to a really great point. And I will do a separate episode entirely on just traveling in general, because this is more about packing. But always make sure that when you're going through TSA that you are as on top of it as you can be, and more proactive than not, because you just don't want to be the person that is trying to find whatever is in your bag that's liquid and you forgot to take your iPad out and this, that, and the other thing. You want to be organized so you feel confident to be able to go through there and it's no big deal. Things may come up, but at least you've done your best to be prepared. And then last but not least, this is another more travel tip, but I still think it's important to note, and I will reiterate it because I think it's so, so, so valuable. And that is to consider getting a credit card with lounge access. So I have the American Airlines Black Card that allows me to go into the Admirals Club, and that is a yearly fee attached to that, although I can't remember how much it is. It ends up paying for itself, and I will say it's saved me so many times. And it also allows you to eat for free, so I believe it to be very worth it, especially if you're traveling by yourself. You end up expending a lot of energy when you're just traveling by yourself, and sometimes you just need a safe place to go. And if you have any delays, you can be comfortable. They have plenty of food there. They have drinks. They have places you can charge your technology. You can even take a shower at some locations. So I can't say enough good things about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be that one in particular. I know a lot of people like Delta as well, but just check that out. And then that way you can also accrue points through using that card and then hopefully use them for future travel. One other thing about the credit card is that there are other credit cards that actually allow you to have lounge access to some lounges around the world. It's just not necessarily through any one lounge. So I know my Chase Sapphire card does have lounge access to other more off-brand lounges. So something to think about too if you already have one of those types of credit cards that may actually have it included. So that was all of my packing tips. I'm sure I forgot things, but after traveling many, many a mile over the past 10 years, I've learned a lot. I've had some crazy experiences, like I mentioned. And what it comes down to is having items that are really functional and very versatile. So as you travel more and more and you know what you might need, it gets easier. I will say it's a little bit more challenging packing for winter destinations than it is for summer destinations because you only need very few things if you're going to a tropical or hot location. I will say when you are packing for winter, it can be a little bit, not a little bit, a lot more bulky and sometimes more challenging, but you get the hang of it over time. And you know what? In most places, worst comes to worst. If you forget something, there's usually a solve. Usually, for the most part, aside from obviously, you need your credit cards, your passport, your phone. Even that you can probably get in another location. I have done that before and it totally sucked, but it did happen. Your medications, things like that that you really need that are personal to you. But other than that, you can usually pick up things along the way and it's not so bad. But if you can be an expert packer, then it makes the trip way more seamless and you don't even have to think about your items as much as you can think about what you are doing on that vacation and all the fun you're going to be having. So I hope you have some fun travel coming up this summer, whether it's local or international or domestic, whatever it is. I wish you a lot of luck with that, and I will be seeing you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.